Hey, squirrel bait. So, you like the shirt? I decided I ought to dress up a little bit nicer whenever I record these videos. So, we're back at the Book of Enoch, and when we finished chapter 13, he uh, he had read out, he had wrote the Watcher's petition, and he went and he read it until he fell asleep. I don't know if it was just that boring or that long, but he read it until he fell asleep and he woke up and like he had visions while he was asleep and he woke up and he went to tell the watchers everything that he had saw. And well, the very last verse here, and I recounted before them all the visions which I had seen in sleep, and I began to speak the words of righteousness and to reprimand the heavenly watchers. So chapter 14 starts off, the scroll of the words of the righteousness, and of the reprimand of the perpetual watchers in accordance with the command of the Holy Great One in that vision. I saw in my sleep what I will now say with a tongue of flesh and with the breath of my mouth, which the Great One has given to men to converse with and understand with the heart. That's kind of a nice verse. I like that. As understand with the heart. As he has created and given to man the power of understanding, the word of wisdom, so he has also created me and given me the power of reprimanding the watchers, the children of heaven. So he's saying that is his purpose. I wrote out your petition, and in my vision it appeared like this, that your petition will not be granted to you throughout all the days of the age, and that judgment has been finally passed on you. Yes, your petition will not be granted to you. And from now on, you will not ascend into heaven for all ages. And in bonds of the earth, the decree has gone out to bind you for all the days of the world. And you will have seen the destruction of your beloved sons beforehand, and you will have no pleasure in them, but they will fall before you by the sword. And your petition on their behalf will not be granted, nor yet on your own, even though you weep and pray, and speak all the words contained in the writing which I have written. And the vision was shown to me like this. Behold, in the vision clouds invited me, and a mist summoned me. And the course of the stars and the lightnings and the course of the stars and the lightnings sped toward me, and the winds in the vision caused me to fly and lifted me upwards and bore me into heaven. And I went in until I drew near to a wall which is built of crystals and surrounded by tongues of fire, and it began to frighten me. And I went into the tongues of fire and drew near to a large house which was built of crystals, and the walls of the house were like a tessellated floor made of crystals. I'm gonna have to look that word up. Tessellated floor made of crystals, and its groundwork was of crystal. Its ceiling was like the path of the stars and the lightnings, and between them were fiery cherubim, and their heaven was as clear as water. A flaming fire surrounded the walls, and its portals blazed with fire. And I entered into that house, and it was hot as fire, and cold as ice. There were no delights of life therein. Fear covered me, and trembling took hold of me. And as I quaked and trembled, I fell on my face, and I beheld a vision. And behold, there was a second house, greater than the former, and the entire portal stood open before me. And it was built of flames of fire, and in every respect it so excelled in splendor and magnificence and extent that I cannot describe to you its splendor and its extent. And its floor was of fire, and above it were lightnings and the path of the stars. and its ceiling was also flaming fire. And I looked and saw a lofty throne therein. Its appearance was as crystal, and the wheels thereof as the shining sun. And there was the vision of the cherubim. And from underneath the throne came streams of flaming fire, so that I could not look thereon. And the great glory sat thereon, and his raiment shone more brightly than the sun, and was whiter than any snow. None of the messengers could enter and behold his face by reason of the magnificence and glory, and no flesh could behold him. The flaming fire was around him, and a great fire stood before him, and none around could draw near him. Myriads of myriads stood before him, yet he needed no counselor. And the most holy ones who were near to him did not leave by night nor depart from him. And until then I had been prostrate on my face, trembling, and the Lord called me with his own mouth, and said to me, Come here, Enoch, and hear my word. And one of the holy ones came to me and waked me. And he made me rise up and approach the door, and I bowed my face downwards. That was pretty magnificent description there. Now I'm curious what the two houses are, because he talks about guys. Now I don't read these beforehand. Like I'm reading these with you. So if I make mistakes, I apologize. But I kind of want to read it fresh. Like I don't ever prepare these. But anyway, so he talks about he gets pulled into heaven by a great wind, and he sees a wall which is built of crystals, like a wall surrounding a city, surrounded by tongues of fire. And I went into the tongues of fire and drew near to a large house, which was built of crystals. And the walls tessellated. I'm going to have to look that up because I have no idea what that means. Tessellated floor. So I looked it up. And the word tessellated, because he describes a tessellated floor in the first house, and its groundwork was of crystal. Tessellated means denoting or characterized by a pattern of repeated shapes, especially polygons, that fit together closely without gaps or overlaps. A tessellated sidewalk is that's pretty darn interesting. I'm sure there's some. So it's just a pattern of repeated shapes. Okay. I had never heard that phrase before. So I'm guessing like brick patterns for sidewalks, like a herringbone pattern, would be tessellated. That's You learn something new every day. But I'm wondering what the significance of the first house is. Because he goes into the first house and he's describing this place just covered in fire and crystals. And like this is fear. Fear covered me. Trembling took hold of me. And as I quaked, we're in verse 14. Yeah, we're in verse 14. There were no delights of life therein. Fear covered me, and trembling took hold of me. Verse 15. And as I quaked and trembled, I fell on my face, and I beheld a vision, and behold, there was a second house, greater than the former. And the entire portal stood open before me, and it was built of flames of fire. So the whole house is built of fire. And in every respect, it so excelled in splendor and magnificence and extent that I cannot describe to you its splendor and its extent. So, the first house that he entered, he walked into the tongues of fire and drew near to a large house. So is he inside the flame? That's how I'm taking this. So he's saying he was carried by the wind into heaven, right? A vision in the clouds invited him, and a mist summoned me. And the course of the stars and the lightning sped towards me, and the winds in the vision caused me to fly and lifted me upward, and bore me into heaven. And I went in until I drew near to a wall which is built of crystals and surrounded by tongues of fire. And it began to frighten me. So he's not. So his vision of heaven is not a happy vision at all. Like this sounds more like what they describe hell. Like I've heard a lot of Baptist preachers describe hell like this. That's very interesting, I think. And maybe he's just seeing one aspect of heaven, or maybe he's trying to poetically maybe he's trying to poetically describe the wrath of God towards the watchers that he's feeling. I'm not sure. But it's all fire and crystal. He walked into the fire. I walked into the tongues of fire, went into the tongues of fire, and drew near to a large house. And the house was built of crystal. The ceiling was paths of stars. And between them, between the paths of the stars and the lightnings, were fiery cherubim. And their heaven, I guess the cherubim, was as clear as water. And flaming fire surrounded the walls. And I entered into that house, and it was hot as fire and cold as ice. So, I feel like he's trying to describe something that he can't really describe here. Like he's trying to put into words what his vocabulary isn't designed to encompass, is what I'm feeling here in this. Like I don't think he's being poetic. I think he's just trying to put into words something that he can't put into words as best as he can. The one that gets me though is verse 14. There were no delights of life therein. Fear covered me and trembling took hold of me. That there were no delights of life therein. That sounds like hell. Like it sounds like he is in hell. Like the fire, the crystals, the lack of life, the lack of delights, the fear. Um, I'm just. So when he fell on his face, he beheld a second vision. And behold, there was a second house, greater than the former, and the entire portal stood open before me. I'm guessing he's talking about the front door. And it was built of flames of fire. And so he's talking about, and in every respect, like it was greater in every respect than the first house he walked into. He may be being poetic here. Like it's lost on me what the first house represents. I kind of hope that they'll go into it in the next verse, in the next chapter. But I mean, it's pretty obvious what the second house represents. because it houses the throne of the great glory. Like he doesn't even call him God in this, which I find interesting. And the great glory sat thereon, and his raiment shone more brightly than the sun, and was whiter than any snow. That is verse 20. He doesn't refer to him as God. I don't think he's referred to him as God yet in any of these chapters. Like the great holy one, the great glory. It's very interesting to me. So, and myriads of myriads stood before him. This is verse 32. A great fire, a flaming fire was around him, and a great fire stood before him, and none around could draw near him. Myriads of myriads stood before him, yet he needed no counselor. And the most holy ones who were near to him did not leave by night nor depart from him. Well, I really don't know what else to say to that because this whole chapter, this chapter 14 here, he's not really even saying anything. He's just describing what he is what he's seen. Like this is the introduction to what he has to say. Like this isn't even what he had to say. It's just the introduction to what he has to say towards the watchers in regard to reprimanding them. So that was a long chapter and it's a very descriptive chapter, but I think it leaves more questions than answers at this point. So I think I'm going to leave it at that. But anyway, Squirrel Bait, I hope you're getting something out of this. But I love you. And I hope that you have a wonderful day. And I'll talk to you later. Bye.